Hello everyone, welcome back to Venus in Virtue, where we practice mindful magic to create change within ourselves and the world around us. Today I'm going to be doing a VR to Katey Flowers hashtag only 10 decks. So my collection is actually pretty small. I only have about 14 or 15 decks total. So I really didn't think it would be that difficult to choose 10 decks. But it actually was pretty challenging. I got it down to about 11 and I was like, I can't decide. But ultimately I did come up with just 10 decks that if I could only keep 10 decks in my collection, these are the ones that I would choose. So let's start off with the classic here. This is the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot or the Smith-Waite Tarot deck, the Centennial edition in a tin. This is one of the first decks that I ever got, and it is the deck that I actually studied and learned tarot on. So this deck has a lot of sentimental value. It has that classic artwork that everyone knows and loves, with a slightly less harsh color scheme with those bright yellow backgrounds. So this has more of a vintage sort of coloring to it, almost like a filter is on the artwork, but I love it. It mutes it just enough without being too muted, so we're still getting all of the important colors that we should be getting with each card. It's just a little bit toned down, a little bit vintage feel, and it's just a classic. And I cannot imagine my tarot practice or my practice in general without it. Just a great little deck, and with it being the tin size, it's the perfect size to just throw in my bag, throw in a purse, and go. So that is the first deck that I would keep. So the next deck is actually an RWS clone. This is the Ethereal Visions Tarot by Matt Hughes. I keep mine in a little crocheted bag that I made a couple months ago. Here are the backs. But this is the first edition. It has the gold foiling, and it's an RWS clone, but it is in the Art Nouveau style. So it's just got a little bit of a spin on it, and I just love all the gold detailing. And it's just absolutely beautiful. This is the first deck that I actually used for readings for myself. While I used the Centennial to study the meanings of the tarot, this was the first deck that I actually read with. And it still gives me crystal clear readings whenever I am just in a funk or have some brain fog going on and I just want a clear message through the cards. This is the deck that I go to. Stunning sun card. Because its color palette and its art style is gentle enough, but it still gives me crystal clear readings. Tells me what I need to hear, but in a gentle way. Absolutely stunning. So that is the Ethereal Visions by Matt Hughes. Alright, so the next deck is Terra de Carlotydes, published by Fournier. And this deck, here are the backs. This deck is so fun and quirky, and it's sort of like Alice in Wonderland vibes, like with the Hierophant here. He's having tea with two rabbits. And it is just so quirky and fun and different, and all of the minors, like all the cups, have this sort of pink background going on. Like the wands are more green. And there is sort of like fairy tale imagery in here. There is also modern references, like I know there's like a Midsummer reference, and like there's David Bowie, and like the Lover's card here is based off of The Kiss. But it's just so fun and different and colorful. And I love how all the knights are riding unicorns. I think that is just something I've never seen before, and it makes it super fun. And then like the Five of Wands here, it's a bunch of horses or donkeys, and they have ties sticks to their heads, like they are pretending to be unicorns and fighting. And I just think it is so fun. And so I go to this deck when I just want a little bit of fun and excitement, you know, like I love this Ten of Pentacles. It's a dragon sleeping with all of his treasure. But yes, so I go to this deck when I just want something fun, and if I kind of need to lift my spirits, like if I'm feeling a little down, feeling a little sad, I will go to this deck and it just puts a smile on my face. No matter, even if I get the quote sad cards or bad cards, it always makes me smile and makes me laugh. Absolutely stunning. So that is the Tarot de Carlotydes by Fournier. So the next deck is the Marshmallow Marseilles by the Wandering Oracle. Here are the backs. Lovely reflective. And I love the color scheme of this deck. This is my first and currently my only Marseille deck. I do plan on eventually getting some other Marseille decks. I'm just kind of keeping my eye out. They are supposed to be released in 2022. But this one is just so colorful and bright, and it has like that sketchy sort of like watercolory coloring, but it still has like solid line work. So something that I sort of struggle with the decks that are like copies of the current original artwork is that the color is like super far outside the lines, and it kind of makes everything a little muddy in my opinion. But this one is still giving us that traditional Marseille imagery, but with a different color scheme, right? So we're seeing a bunch of mint and yellow and pinks, and definitely not the traditional Marseille colors, which is more primary colors. So it's a fun spin, but it just gives me very clear readings, and I go to this deck when I just want a very simple, like clear-cut reading, because we have the majors, the quartz, and then the minors are pips. So I get the elemental energy and the numerological meaning behind the card, and I'm able to combine those together and just get very specific readings every time. I just love looking at this deck and flipping through, and it's a great little size. I have itty bitty hands, so I love just shuffling this deck. So that is the Marshmallow Marseilles by the Wandering Oracle. Alright, so next we have the Star Seeker Tarot, and I keep mine in this tarot box with the moon phases on it, given to me by a lovely friend of mine. And this is an independent deck that I got from Etsy, created by the Van Mystic on Instagram, and I'll be sure to link her Instagram and her Etsy shop down below. But this deck is as if Tarot fell asleep and was taking a dream. What would that dream look like, right? It's very ethereal, very airy, I'll say, but all of the colors, like it's these beautiful purples and blues and pinks, and it is this vector art style that I absolutely adore. And it is just so good. And this is my hug deck. So when I just need a very gentle, very comforting reading, this is the deck that I will reach for. I use this one for self-care readings. I originally got this deck to do some shadow work, and it actually does great at that as well. So it allows me to dive deep into my shadow self, but also it's still very gentle. And it's also one of my most diverse decks. There's a lot of different skin tones, and there is some LGBTQ characters in the deck. And it is absolutely beautiful and stunning and just very gentle. See, but even in the Tower card here, but it is just absolutely wonderful and gentle. And it's like a hug in a deck, and I absolutely love this and could never part with it. Oh, and here are the gorgeous backs, and the edges have this beautiful matte purple edging. And the creator recently came out with a pocket edition, so it's a little bit smaller, glossy, so a little bit brighter colors, and the edging is a more holographic. So if you're interested in the deck but maybe want a smaller size, I'll leave her shop link down below. So the next deck, if I could only keep 10 decks, would be the John Bauer Tarot. And again, I've put mine in a little itty bitty crochet bag that I made. But I have actually restructured and modified this deck. So I have trimmed it of the borders, and some of the cards, I think about a third of the deck, I have actually given a different place in the tarot. So I will leave my flip through of my restructured deck down below. But this is my very earthy deck. It has a lot of forest creatures, gnomes and trolls, and a very muted color scheme, a very earthy color scheme. So like here's some of those trolls, and it's just absolutely beautiful. So when I need some grounding, or when I really want to embrace the earthy energy, this is the deck that I will go to. And I love John Bauer's artwork. It is absolutely stunning. And this is one of those decks that was that took pre-existing artwork and put it into the tarot. So sometimes I do struggle with those decks. Sometimes I feel like some of the art that is chosen for a particular card doesn't quite work. So that is why I ultimately ended up restructuring this deck. But I love how it turned out. And that process of restructuring the deck, trimming the borders, and writing all the new card titles on here was actually a bonding process for me, so it allowed me to get an even deeper bond with this deck. And here are the backs, but they have been trimmed a little bit, so that is my John Bauer Tarot. Alrighty, so next we have a deck that is newer to my collection but has quickly become one of my favorites and one that I cannot wait to work with more, and that is the Terra Volatile. So this deck has a lot of very rich imagery and is RWS based as well. Love this Queen of Coins. And it's a very dark and moody deck, so I kind of see this as maybe the shadow equivalent of my Ethereal Visions, where it's still very RWS based and inspired, and we're seeing a lot of that traditional imagery just in a different art style, whereas Ethereal Visions is very light. This one is a little bit darker and grittier and moodier. And so far I've been using this for shadow work readings, as well as when I know I need to hear something I may not want to admit just yet. I will go for this deck and it tells me, it's like, okay, yes, that's what I needed to hear, you know? But it's not aggressive in its readings. It is still it's just honest. And sometimes honesty can be hard to swallow, right? And I just love the art style, that sort of lino cut, stamping sort of imagery. And then there are a lot of cards, like this, for example, that the artists have added like line work or other geometric shapes to sort of help us focus the eye. Or like here where there's circles, a lot of times they will overlap in a particular area. So here it's overlapping in a very suggestive place so that it really helps us focus on the certain shadowy aspect of the devil, right? So, or like here in the 9 of coins, we see almost like a halo around the individual person and a halo around the bird. And it's where it crosses and where it expands to. It's all intentional, right? So I love the addition of sacred geometry in this deck as well. Absolutely beautiful. And again, this is the newest deck in my collection, but I'm very excited to work with it more. And here are the backs. Oh, and I should say this is the 2nd edition, and this is the heavier version. So they have 2 versions in the 2nd edition. One is this heavier version, which is a thicker cardstock, and it is matte. And soon they will be releasing the classic version, which is linen and slightly thinner cardstock with a little bit darker images. So I will leave their website down below. That is the Terra Volatile. Okay, next we have the Mermaid Tarot by Leeza Robertson. Again, in a crochet bag. If you guys would like to see how I make these bags, please leave a comment down below and I could definitely work on making a video of that for you guys. Here is the Mermaid Tarot. Here are the backs, and I have edged mine in a Crayola teal. It does not come edged. I did this myself. And this is a Llewellyn deck, so mass market, and it is pretty glossy cardstock, but I really do not mind. Let's see, you can kind of see how glossy it is there. But I really don't mind. I find that it makes for very easy shuffling. And this deck is wonderful because the entire deck is very diverse in skin tone, as well as we also have some diversity in age. And each of the minors are actually a different region. And also for the majors, some of the cards, like the Hierophant here, the creator, Leeza, actually took a different approach to it, right? So instead of the traditional, very religious figure we see in the Hierophant, here we see a young merfolk writing her people's history down. And recording the wisdom of her people. So a slightly different image, and it just creates a lovely little spin on the traditional meanings. But each of the suits, like the wands, are Polynesian, the swords are more Arctic. Let's see if we can find the cups are open ocean, and let's see, the pentacles are freshwater. So I love that we're still getting, even though it's a mermaid deck, we're still getting that elemental energy. And then in the majors, strength and the devil card have a very sustainability base, and even in the Hanged Man you could see that as a sustainable message, right? So I just love this deck. I reach for this deck when I really want to hone in on water energy, so I reached for this a lot at the beginning of Scorpio season this year. And I also reach for it in summertime, of course, where we're out at the beach more. But it's a really great deck to use all year round too. So when I just want to tap into watery energy, oh, see, here's the Death card. So definitely getting a more sustainability message here. But I love that it is an ocean deck, but we're still getting all the elemental energy, and it's not just all ocean. There's still some uniqueness to the minors. Definitely one of my favorites. Okay, so while this is top 10 decks, this is my one and only Oracle deck that I would choose to keep if I could only have 10 decks in my collection. I typically do not use Oracle a whole bunch in my practice, but when I do, I sort of use it as an addition to a tarot reading. So this is the Enchanted Art Oracle by Pettibone. And this is a cute little deck that has sort of vintagey, it kind of reminds me of like the 20s or the 40s. And it's that older art, and each card has a little message. And I just find that this deck is so uplifting and so gentle and so kind. And it pairs well with a lot of decks that I do have. I like to pair this one with the Ethereal Visions mostly. And it's just a cute little deck. And it reminds me a lot of my grandmother, just with the kind messages and the sort of art style. It takes me back to a time that she would always talk about. So definitely a very special deck in my collection. And this one was, this deck was gifted to me by a close friend. So it was my first Oracle deck. So it holds a very special place in my heart. And while there are a lot of like angels, typically I don't really jive with angels so much. But in this deck, since it reminds me of my grandmother, and she loved angels as well, it sort of strengthens that connection for me. So that is the Enchanted Art Oracle by Pettibone. And last but not least, my 10th deck, if I could only keep 10, is the Revival Art Tarot. Here are the backs. And this is made by Tarot Studios. So this deck is one that I use to tap into ancestor energy, and as well as I've sort of started using it for past life work. I have not taken a deep dive into past life work just yet, but the art sparks something within me that takes me back to a life that I have lived in the past, right? So looking at these images, it's like looking at old friends and looking at things that I feel like I've seen before. And I've always felt drawn to this sort of era, whether it's movies or books or art like this. I always have a really strong pull to it. And so I'm hoping that by working with this deck, I can sort of work through some past life experiences and kind of really get to the root of why I feel the way I feel with this time period, right? The Six of Cups reminds me of my grandmother as well, so very special. And it's just an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous deck. And the cardstock is absolutely, it's like butter. It's super fun to shuffle. If I look through, I love the Nine of Cups. He's so happy. Just a cute little guy with his wine. But yeah, something about this art, it just really sort of takes me to another world, almost another place. And when I look at the art, I just sort of get sucked right in. And it's absolutely beautiful. Makes my soul happy. So that is the Revival Art Tarot by Tarot Studios. Alrighty guys, thank you so much for joining me today as we took a look through my top 10 decks. If I could only have 10 in my collection, these are the ones that I would choose. If you have a VR to the hashtag as well, please let me know down in the comments. I'd love to check out your video. Or if you don't have a channel yourself, feel free to leave a comment with your top 10 decks that you would keep if you could only have 10 in your collection. And on your way out, guys, please remember, you matter, you are loved, and you can make a difference. Bye, everyone.